I welcome all of you on the occasion of one-day national webinar on contemporary Indian theatre organized by KKM College, Manwat. Now we are going to start the second session of this webinar, and the guest speaker for this session is Dr. Rahul Kamble sir. Dr. Rahul Kamble teaches in Department of Indian and World Literatures at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He offers PG courses on childhood studies, comic narratives, Indian women playwrights, American literature, and African American literature. He has his PhD on Indian women playwrights in translation. He has co-edited an anthology, Approaches to Childhood, Issues and Concerns in Creative Representations in November 2015. Topic of his speech is Contemporary Women's Theatre in India. Now I request Dr. Rahul Kamble sir to deliver a speech on this topic, Contemporary Women's Theatre in India. Dr. Rahul Kamble sir.
Thank you, Kapse sir, for your introduction. It has been wonderful to listen to the distinguished speakers since morning. I also would like to thank the organizers of the college for organizing this conference. And I also like to thank the organizing team, the members, the principal, Dr. Munde,
Session started? Yes.
Dr. Shinde, then Dr. Gurgesh Ravande, and all others who are in the I'd also like to thank the two speakers. Since morning, we have been listening to them. Professor Mustajib Khan, I have heard him earlier also, and Professor Shailaja Wadikar. It's been really nice to listen to Professor Mustajib Khan, especially, आपण म्हणतो ना मराठीत पोट तिडकीने बोलणं. So this sensitivity and the sensibility comes from the humane nature of the scholarship, the very humane nature of the person, and the concerns and the serious concerns that he raised through his presentation. Most of the concerns, I agree to what he has said. So it was nice listening to his presentation, as well as Professor Wadikar's presentation also. I would like to talk about women's theatre in India. Let's also understand, when we talk about theatre, we often use these words interchangeably: drama, theatre, and performance. But how are they related? If we try and establish the relationship among them, then maybe we'll be able to see how to look at the three aspects of the same experience. For example, performance is an experiential dimension or an aspect, whereas theatre is the spatial aspect. When it comes to when you say theatre, what comes to your mind is the space, where it is performed, whether it is proscenium theatre, street theatre, online theatre groups that are active now, or any other. But we talk about the space. Space includes performers, the audiences, the architect, everything. So it's mostly that spatial experience. And when we say, drama, we mostly talk about the textual aspect of the experience. So when something is performed, something is, staged in a particular space, and later on comes the need that, okay, let us institutionalize it. Let us fix it somewhere. So you try and write the script and then get it printed, and the printed text is circulated, not only among the readers, the practitioners, the scholars, but the readers, to the wider, public. These are different aspects of the same experience. Now try and locate these experiences or these aspects, talking about women's performance in India. I'll share my PPT. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yeah, and hopefully I am audible as well properly.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, so I would like to begin with a few questions. What is women's theatre in India? So let us begin with a few questions. When you ask questions, it gives you a right direction or right framework to look at different aspects of women's theatre in India. So I begin with this: how does women's theatre? And I have multiple theatres in mind. That's why I'm saying, how do women's theatres originate? Where is the origin? Where do they think that they have to perform? Is it like that they decide at one point that they have to perform, and then they come out, they find a space, they find a script, and they start performing? Or is the performance innate in women's life? So where does it originate? What is women's theatre about? Also think about the problem in distinguishing women's performance in society and the practice of performance in theatre. Women perform, we also perform. They perform. Think about the functional aspect of gender. If you have read the story Girl by Jamaica Kincaid, it talks about a mother giving a set of instructions to the daughter, saying, this is what you have to do, this is how you have to do, this is how you have to do, this is how you have to avoid, this is how you survive in society. So mostly she is training about the kind of performance the daughter is supposed to do when she is growing, or the daughter should be learning to perform as part of the society, and that is mostly functional. This is how you have to do, this is how you have to wash, this is how you, and this is how we see in life also, the functional aspect. So is it possible to distinguish the two, or it is very seamless? Women perform and women perform on stage. And are these two performances different in two places? Right, in the domestic place and the theatre, that is a public place. History of women's participation in theatre is also another aspect that we can take into account. Now, when we talk about history of women's drama, we have to, also think about the print culture and all, since, at what time the drama began to be published, being circulated, being part of academia, being part of the academic inquiry. Or also the limitations which the textuality imposes on women's performances. There is not all that can be documented. There are many aspects of the performances. There are silences which the text cannot, encode. So the textuality also imposes different kinds of limitations, and that is one of the drawbacks, or in other sense, that is one of the enabling element also for women's performances, and that we have to look relatively, how we are looking at women's drama. And it's not only about the history of women's drama, but when you start looking at each performance, let's say, scattered across the places, and each performative practice or a tradition or a performative event, and then start documenting, then actually you see historiography of women's theatre in India. For me, instead of history of women's drama, which is simply a chronological document of very significant playwrights and the significant plays and significant texts, actually, that kind of a history is is quite biased, because you constantly think about what is significant, who is the significant playwright. History is always about that powerful person. We know history, we have read. It's about the kings and queens and their rules and the important decisions and the wars and all. What happens to the ordinary people? What happens to the people outside the important places or the spaces of power centers, is almost absent. For that, you need historiography, how performances take place across the geographical, areas. So it gives the broad spectrum of practices. Professor Mustajib Khan mentioned about, I am giving one example, grind mill songs and all, something that is not considered as, theater, but that is performance. Now we'll come to that also, how theater is defined and all, and how that helps or creates obstacles when we look at women's theater in India. I'll also take into account women's theater and a few questions which Butler raises, and we can also use them as touchstone to examine whether these questions can be applied to women's theater in India, and if we are applying those questions, then what kind of outcomes we see. Now, this is this journey, like women in theater to women's theater. I mean, women didn't own the theater in the earlier stages to women controlling the theater. Now, when I'm just locating the inquiry in the last 100 years or so, I mean, and this part also is very short because I just want to give an overview from women in theater to women controlling the theater, or women having some power exercising on theater. So in 1915, there was a survey by the journal, and most of the people who participated in it, they were asked the question, whether women should be allowed in theater or not, what kind of performances should take place and all. So mostly the male respondents were there, and the argument in favor of women's entry in theater was keeping in mind, mostly it was in line with the moral and cultural argument, like women's entry should be for the development of art, for saving the theater from obscenity, or restoring the social stability. So women's participation is a vehicle, is a tool for the larger good. It's not for women. So this is how it begins. And talking about the institutionalized views, like you have a survey where people, distinguished people, obviously important people in the society, come and give opinion and all. So it is from that perspective. So whether women should be in the theater or not, if yes, why? And the argument in favor of women's entry in theater is that it should be serving the larger good, larger purpose, that art should be developed, diversifying, saving theater from obscenity and all that. There was also, commercial theater. We know, proscenium theater, but mostly the commercial theater. And there were a few women actresses also performing. But definitely it doesn't mean that it was substantially, conscious about women's issues as such, or any of that sort. They were just women for the sake of women. To some extent, they portrayed and all. And we know that the kind of restrictions they worked in. If you start thinking about that, researching, we'll come to know the constraints in which they were working also. Then comes the informal, the folk theater and all, Nautanki, and the ownership by women in UP and mostly the North-speaking, states. And women had the ownership of those theater troupes and all. But as we know that it was not a kind of a mainstream theater or theater that will be that's not at par at the theater. I mean, that's again what he has said, performance practice, let's say. But the major thing is, if we start looking at now, when we are, looking at it from the perspective of historiography, then all these performances, performance traditions and practices become part of the theater, that this kind of theater existed then. So while examining that, we also realized that the women performers or the women owners and the entire theater practice was not without the issues like social class, who they are, where they come from, the financial status or middle class contempt towards them or disapproval and all. So all these issues were there. Or think about the emergence of folk theater in post-independence India. You have different forms, tamasha and all. Mostly the popular form, indigenous tradition, then slowly they started institutionalized also. Then there were adaptations by male playwrights. We have heard those examples. But that also was not without the stigma for the folk artist or disapproval of their art as well as their individuality. We also have women playwrights who started writing way back 1930s and all, women-centered plays also. Rashid Jahan or Ismat Chughtai or Malti Bai Bedekar. And there's a series of women playwrights who started writing about women-centered plays, but they were not performed at large the way male writers' plays or commercial theater was performed. So those issues were there. Now what I like to look at these performances is from these two dimensions of women's theater performances. Performance of women as social, cultural, and political beings in life. As I said earlier, women as women perform in life. 2, how she performs or allowed to perform. 3, how her performance is viewed coincides with the nature of women's theater emerging from this entire discourse. And women were always that's why I said performance is viewed, were always gazed at. Her performance is always under scrutiny. She is always under scrutiny. So all these things, when women started performing, women started coming out and becoming part of that, what we call as theater, all these issues were there as well. So we can take into account this. 2, how women's theater responded to the reformist or conformist models of performance. So when a woman comes out and starts performing in the theater, what kind of role she performs? Performing ideal woman or subverting the stereotyping within the roles assigned to her, or she is able to create one's own roles. And these two things, if we start looking at, there are various dimensions. I am picking up 2 dimensions, and we can examine women's theater from these 2 dimensions as well. Now, what is, how women participated in theater? Roles written for them. Earlier, I mentioned about the commercial theater, performed by men also earlier. 2, roles written, directed, performed by women and watched by all. This is what the journey is. And everything lies between the 2. And there are many, it has a spectrum actually. And then if we start examining, how a woman becomes a producer, and it has its own journey. Integral, that's what is historiography. So you don't just mention the name of the woman producer or a woman director, but she carries the entire history of the journey of a woman becoming a director. Right? All the locations she has, moved through, all the experiences she has carried through. And that makes her the director. Then control of the 3 aspects of performance, theater and drama. As I said earlier, performance is an experiential, theater is spatial, and drama is textual aspect of the same experience. For women, it is very integral. Like she performs always, as I mentioned here, women perform womanhood seamlessly in life and on stage. It is doing one's own condition of being a woman, but both go unnoticed. Condition of being or becoming, construction and reconstruction of subjectivities, It is all part of the performance. It's part of the experience. You can't isolate that experience when somebody comes out of the home, somebody comes out of the street, somebody comes out of the university, institute, and lands on the stage and you perform. It's really difficult. So she performs here, she performs there, and the condition of, it's one's own conditions, performing the woman. It's difficult to isolate. Now, theater is also about the spaces she performs womanhood, domestic or otherwise. She keeps on performing. Visuality is involved, so scrutiny is also inevitable. She is constantly, her performance is, and I don't need to explain it much. We know what I mean by visuality and the scrutiny. How women are, or women's performances, performance in the sense, daily observable performance phenomenon, kind of. Also, it is important when we talk about the theater, whether she owns the space or not. And that's a major issue. When we say theater, we also have to take into account what kind of, is there an ownership of the space? Even we don't have, let's say, women or men don't own the theater, but you go and hire. Right? I'll give one example from Pakistan's Madiha Gohar and all. She has a book on alternative theater in Pakistan. When she says when they wanted to perform, and this theater troupe went, it's about the women education. Just imagine women's and education. And she says when we wanted to have a place for performance, they were shooed away from place to place, and the entire village denied them the place to perform because it's about women, education, liberty issues and all. And everybody was asking, if it is entertainment, come and perform in our house or on the top of the house. But the moment somebody listens that it's about education and women, so women wanting to own that space where she can perform what she likes is problematic. Theater, the moment you say theater, it's also about the place where you can perform. And then what kind of audience is going to be there? Whether it is receptive, critical, what kind of an audience? It doesn't have a control over the audience. Experimentality, if we see women's theater having highly experimental nature, it is out of necessity. It can't have 3-act play, elaborate characters, elaborate setup and all, because it's also issue about resources on one hand, affordability on other hand. But then who will go and who will watch? Women who do not have time to come out of the houses, go to a place and watch. Theater practitioners and women reach to them. For example, Usha Ganguly mentions many examples when she goes to villages. She alone goes to villages with her bag and tiffin and water bottle and performs in front of 20 women, 10 women and all. Now, if you call it a micro theater, it is, devised because of absence of time and theater space. Women do not have this, she mentions about those tribal women where she goes and performs. Is part of acceptance. When a script for publication only, when it is very sure about many things, whether controversy, whether it will sell, what kind of category of readers will buy it, all of those things are there. So accepting a script of a play for publication is, passing the test of that acceptance. Then passing it into thematization, then creation of discursive idiom and academic or critical perception. So from the performance to theater to making it into a dramatic text, this journey is very interesting, because then slowly it started creating its own idiom, also making people, the academia, interested in it, critically perceiving it, analyzing it, comparing it, and then explaining it to the people at large. What women's theatre is about? It's about performing womanhood in spaces other than domestic, and it has different meanings. When you say perform at home and perform outside, because as I said, visual, it is also a statement coming out and performing. It's also criticality of doing one's gender, because when you do it every day in everyday life, you're not conscious about it. But when you go out and select a performative space and start performing, you are conscious what you are, and that consciousness is that consciousness of what constitutes the womanhood, what you are, how are you going to be presented, or how are you going to be perceived by people. You become more and more consciousness, and that consciousness is about your womanhood. Right. That's what women's theatre is about. What it does is redefining the performance and the processuals of the theatre. Architecture of space is redesigned. It's not the same huge proscenium theatre, because there is no question of resources. So do away with the resources. There are the technical glitches which will attract your attention. Think about Brecht. He deliberately bridges your attention by disturbing through making the technical apparatus glitchful, so that you are constantly detracted from it to what is being said. This is about women's theatre. There are many performances you will see, I'm sure you will agree, where just a woman character comes on stage. Maya Krishna Rao's performance was mentioned by Professor Mustajib Khan. She just comes. Usha Ganguly comes in the journey within, or crossing the river. Just a woman comes on a bare stage, on any platform, and she just speaks the mind and then goes. Right. So it's completely redesigning of that architecture where the performance will take place. Optimum usage of the body. It is the body which is concentrated upon, because the body is always under erasure. So body is foregrounded. It is the body that is the site of bearing memory, trauma, connect with the female lineage also. So that body is brought in front of us, and then we are made to constantly look at the body. Now, in both the ways, it is critical. One is to make the body subject to the scrutiny, and let the people scrutiny, and let the scrutiny turn it inward and playing the fear out. Right. This is how it is. It happens. I have given one example, C.S. Lakshmi's play Crossing the River. There is a protagonist, Sita. I'll tell you, when I was doing my PhD and when I went with these plays, people in the research registration committee, they were laughing and they were saying, are these plays? These are not plays, because, one person comes on stage and speaks few lines and goes back. It is not a play, because we are familiar with the play, 3-act play, 4-act play, proper beginning, character, plot, and these things. But then the question is, why should women follow that kind of an order? If she wants to make a point against the very order in which the play is written. So should she also follow the genre? I'll come to that later. Rereading of the myths. Women had always secondary status in myths, we know that. They were agency-less, voiceless and all. So women's theatre in India is also an attempt to recover and reinstate their existence, at least discursively. I mean, there are some plays which are written about that as well. Also, it raises the discursivity of womanhood. Women's theatre makes women's life experiences the subject of the discussion. Also broadening the modes of representation and discussion. You talk about it, or the woman protagonist will make you talk about it, will make you object to herself, and then making it part of aesthetic and academic inquiry also. So women's theater is about that. Also, it repoliticizes the theater space. Right, it's not only just she comes and performs a role written by a male playwright or something like that, but also examining her capacities to perform and represent herself, her idiom and language, rewriting the history of drama from where she is absent. Right, you start thinking about that. Also, democratizing the caste-based spaces. This one example I found in Vinodini's play Thirst. It's a street theater. What street theater does is, particularly in this play, is we all know in villages, how caste works, or how even the panchayats are used to deny the lower caste their right and all. So what she does is, she also uses the very structure and the nature and the function of performance of a panchayat by bringing the discourse of democracy to a village. We say, like, caste-based, hierarchy-based spaces, democratizing, making people talk about issues, making people talk about the inequality in all places which are caste biased and all. Also, spatializing the democracy. Democracy is not something written only in the book, or not confined to an institution, or not expressed through later, like somebody's judgment that, caste-based, prejudice should go. Somebody just gives a statement. It's not, it doesn't have any bearing on democracy. So what you do is, you also spatialize the democracy by taking the democratic values and the principles to the places. So it's not confined only to institutions and law-abiding books and the people, but it's also practiced in spaces. Women's theater does that. I'm talking here about women's theater, so I'm confining this to women's theater. Street theater is mostly about that. Assuming roles, women also assume different roles. They also re-aestheticize its departure from the spectacular and voyeuristic mode to an experience where the viewer becomes co-creator and sharer of the experience. It is different from catharsis, remember. Also aligning with the core instinct of womanhood, talking about silences, talking about resiliences, talking about endurances, talking about creativities, talking about alternativity, talking about the abilities, unifying abilities of women. So it's not about brave, heroic, or tragic flaw, something like that. But what is core to the womanhood, the aesthetics flows from it, which, binds other women. Reinforcing female heirship through the continuum of womanhood also. Think about the grind mill songs. Women's tradition always flowed, from mother to the daughter, from the daughter, to her daughter and all. That tradition is not documented and all, but that is a female heirship. So all the experiences which she had conveyed to the next generation. So women's theater is also about that, documented. The question of genre, which I always grappled with because I was asked this question, are these plays? Right? Should it conform to the dramaturgy, male playwrights, Aristotle or Bharata, or the performance according to performative intent, their needs, the scope within which they can perform, time that they have, or the choices that they can make? They write obituary for this plot, character, thing. The conventional dramaturgy, we know that it originated in patriarchy. Either you have a hero, it's hero-centric, right? Tragic flaw, heroic exploits and all. And then you cry over hero's death. That is none of the concerns of the women playwrights. There is no hero as such. Creation of a plot is coercive selection of life events. Aristotle says that, right? You have to choose only significant events which has some bearing on the plot, which can make the plot very, very effective, so that you cannot lose your attention. Should be closely, tightly knit with an aim of achieving the catharsis. Life is viewed in terms of remarkable event or incidents. Whether women's life is, or whether women's life, if we start thinking about remarkability in women's life, how many remarkable events there would be. So then there would be no play. All right. So it cannot be in the same way. Life, not in terms of the remarkability of the events happening in women's life. It has to be very, very, remarkability of the ordinary life. It has this very ordinary life has to be made remarkable. This is how it is, turned heads down. Micro stories into micro theater. These are all everyday stories which come in women's theater. Usha Ganguly's individual performances in villages about, their everyday lives, their struggle, their fight, and all. Performative of the life narratives. Mulki Zali Ho, Jyoti Mapsekar's play, the narrative of every woman. The nature is, singular to choral. In women's theater, you always find, even in Mulki Zali Ho, for example, if you remember, it begins with that, choral song. So women's theater, or if you are familiar with, if you have watched For Colored Girls by Entozaki Shange, it is choral, it is choreo poem, 7 women wearing 7 colors coming and talking to each other, creating a human wall, talking about all womanhood going through situations of rape and oppression in and, within and without the family life, right, like that. So it's always about choral. It's about womanhood. It's a shared experience. It's also about a forum theater, right? It is argumentative. It's not something, coming and playing and all. In all the plays that I read or I watched, there is an argument. There is a kind of an urge to make somebody hear that, to counter something. If you remember, Audre Lorde says, no, poetry is not luxury for women. It is a slogan. It is a pamphlet. It is, a march to, it's not luxury or, that aesthetic kind of an experience. Also the oral culture, right? Most of the experiences remain in air, in memory, in conversations. They're not documented as, we see. Think about, make an, survey, and you will find that male writers and women writers, in fact, in one of the plays, in the performances, Usha Ganguly says that, if we collect women's experiences and put together about their life and all, won't we have an alternative history of humanity? Think about it carefully. Women talking about their experiences. If they are documented, we will have a different account of history altogether. Just imagine. So everything is oral actually. It is in memory, it is in conversations, in private conversations, or in silences also. Folk theater or grindmill songs I'm giving. The problem of written drama or the print culture or the control and the authentic, is that women didn't have the control of the print. Also, there is this issue, like, what is printed is authentic. So whether women's experiences are authentic to be documented, that question is there, and that always prevented women's experiences, ordinary experiences, being printed and documented. Also, the assumptions about the written text of drama, texts preceding the performances, Here, it is the performance and the experience precedes the text. That is actually a valuable question when we talk about the genre. It's also about meta theater. how that theater is, developed. We have to look beyond the horizon of themes. If we concentrate only on themes, we will be doing partial justice to women's theater. It's widening the academic interest beyond the thematic exploration. If we just concentrate only on the themes, then it is just a partial justice to what the women's theater is, because it involves many things: women coming together, women's organizing, women's issues in performances, reception of women's performances, right? How society is critical. So many things are there. I'll just give one example. If we start thinking only about the theme, then the relationship and the dynamics of women's theater in the performance and the spaces and the time will be excluded. In one of her plays, she mentioned the walk which she performed after the Delhi gang rape. And she mentioned this sentence: "I want to walk freely on a road in a city after it is dark." Now, I have highlighted these words. If we start relating these words, obviously I as a woman, can I walk freely? Walking freely is an aspiration on a road, is space in a city after it is dark, whether this time is for me or not, right? It is gender's aspiration of a space free from fear, irrespective of time. Now, if we just think about the theme, we will actually miss the dynamics of all the things, connected. Now, this is an idiom of the, women's theater that is in the making. We have to be very, very conscious about while analyzing. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll definitely miss the very core part, the performative part, and then we will not be able to do any justice to women's theater. We'll just concentrate on theme. Women's theater is also about her story, history, historiography of the theater, something that is not taken into account, women's performances and all. It's also a journey of women's theater practitioners from playing minor roles to assuming roles. I mentioned it earlier. Designing the theater space to performance, exercising the choice to prioritize what, how, when, and where to perform. Controlling. I'll take few questions from Butler's essay about performativity and gender, and we can examine, how we can apply and what kind of meaning arises from it. Gender identity, she says, is a performative accomplishment compelled by social sanction. Women perform, but this performative accomplishment is also not without the social sanction. As long as it is within the parameters of what is sanctioned, it goes unpunished. She mentions that later on, how the punitive intention is revived. The duality of performance. Performance of gender role in life is abiding the gender, being right person, a right woman, perfect woman, right like that, an ideal woman. And in theater, where there is a possibility to explore possibility of non-compliance, which she can take the liberty. But how much and how? I mean, these two I am putting together. She says it is an identity tenuously constituted in time, identity instituted through a stylized repetition of acts. Further, gender is instituted through the stylization of the body. Body is conditioned that way. I was mentioning the story of, Jamaica Kincaid's story, Girl, the very functional aspect of gender, the repetitiveness of the functionality, and how those functions are naturalized. After a point of time, we start thinking that a woman should be working this, because not only the person who is made to perform the functions in a stylized way, in a repetitive manner, agrees to it, but the viewer also starts expecting the same thing from the person. And so this is how it is naturalized, both the performer as well as the viewer. There is this ceaseless and seamless performance and evaluation. Performance of roles and functions, evaluative gaze of the community, and the punitive consequence. If somebody fails in performing that ideal woman or performing that particular role, then obviously we know that there is a punitive consequence. There is a kind of a punishment, and the punishment varies. We know, how in UP and other places every day there are instances of punishing women, of what kind of punishment that is, and how spectacles are made out of it, how the spectacles are circulated so that others refrain themselves or refrain their daughters from doing that, going away from what is expected from them and all. Performing one's gender wrong initiates a set of punishments, which is both obvious and indirect. She mentions gender is a project of which cultural survival is the end. Women also know, if you read Jamaica Kincaid's story, women also know that in order to survive in the society, to what extent she can go to deviate from the norm. Now, she also negotiates. The women's theater is also about negotiation with what kind of a role is given to her and what role she can carve for her. Women's theater is about that negotiation. Theatrical performance subject to censorship and scathing, that we talk about, Nautanki and all. So that is what all about women's theater is. I stop here. Hi.
Yes, sir. Just a minute. Professor. Over to you, Professor.
Hello. Question or session?
Thank you, sir. If there are questions from the audience, there may be a question answer session. If anyone
Hello, everyone. We have to wait for a moment. Very error.
Yeah, I can see one question coming from Kyle. Is theater drama influence society or vice versa? It's mutual. Theater actually comes from society. Theater reflects on society. The reflections that we see in theater are also kind of mirrors. They also make you reflect on yourself, and we try and modify. In fact, if you read Ray Bradbury's book, Fahrenheit, Fahrenheit 351, something like that. He says, the protagonist at the end of the story says, it's my project now to install mirrors across the city. Why? Because people will be looking at themselves in the mirror. It's quite essential for people to look at themselves first, what they have become. Only when they realize that what they have become, what they have been reduced to, then they will be like, kind of introspection and transformation. So it's mutual.
Any other question?
May I ask a question?
Please proceed.
Yes?
Please proceed.
Yeah, I'm Nina Gokte from SRTM University, Department of French. So first of all, I would just like to thank you for this excellent presentation once again, as I did in the comments. And I just would like you to elaborate a little more on the point that I'm about to ask you about. That is, you spoke about how the very parameters, the internal and the external parameters of theater, way we study these parameters need to be changed if we really want to create a historiography of women's theater. I think that is, in a way, what you were talking about. But the thing I want to ask, and I would like you to elaborate a little more, is that if after crossing this step, or while talking about themselves, their own life events, their own life, etc., representing that on the stage as a writer, director, translator, and audience, do you think that women involved in theater are moving further away, or let us say are moving beyond just self-representation on the stage? Or it is very evident after the historical erasure that women have faced everywhere, that they would want to talk about themselves and make themselves visible on the stage in every way possible. But beyond that, are we moving beyond that as women in theater? Means, what are your observations? I would just give an example. I don't remember the name of the play, but a few years back, I read the Marathi script of a play by Pradnya Dayar Pawar, set in an urban landscape. I can't really elaborate on it, but I think you would have a better understanding on this issue than I would. Are they moving beyond just talking about themselves or the things that matter to them, the examples that you gave in your presentation? Are we moving beyond that?
Yeah, definitely they go beyond that. See, self-representation, first the representation, the critical representation, communication, these are the stages in which they move. For example, from the domestic to the theater is the first stage. Definitely from that, they move, as I mentioned in Maya Krishna Rao's performance, for example. It's also about the repoliticizing. So what you talk about when the rape incident happened, for example, there, you talk about how do you want the free space, the free time. We often mention about, right, 7 o'clock. So it's not the time for women. So this temporality is also gendered. So when she says that, I want to walk freely, it's also politicizing the discourse about the gender. And it's not about one person or the experience, but also that huge class, the working women who have to go out for work and return sometimes by midnight, or sometimes go and work at night and come back in the morning and all. So it's also about the class. Then she doesn't become merely the woman. She is a woman, obviously, but she also represents that huge working class as well. So it also goes beyond. Think about Hidden Fires, for example, Manjula Padmanabhan. She talks about, if you have read, she has in those monologues, Hidden Fires and all, she talks about the violence. One of the monologues is about the rioter, one who participates in riot. And he boasts that he participated in riots all over the period and all. And one day he himself becomes the subject of the rioters, and the people come and he starts telling that, I am one of you. Don't kill me. I am also a writer. I'll come with you and all. But nobody listens and he is killed. There she talks about violence. Or let's say, think about oral history of violence by Meenakshi Verma. She talks about, how not only women, but what violence changed for the society. Oral history of violence, something that is not documented. So women went, these playwrights also went away from just talking about themselves to talking about themselves as a social class also. If you remember, but this is another example from outside of India. I just forgot. Waiting for Godot was performed in Sarajevo. It's presenting the absurdity. I just forgot. Talking about the situation of absurdity across the spaces, how this predicament of absurd is shared by other people who were also caught in the same situation like the Second World War. So they definitely talk about, this is the beginning. These are the stages in which they move.
Thank you, sir. I think this is next time I would really like it if you would expand more on this topic, and you're invited once again, maybe by our university, to specifically focus on this issue. Thank you for your answer. Yeah.
Thank you, madam, for raising a question. Is there any question? Otherwise, we will conclude this session.
Please conclude.
Yes.
Please conclude.
Yes. I am very much thankful to Dr. Rahul Kamble sir, who has also delivered a very yes.
May I ask the question?
Yes. You may reach. Okay.
Sir, Rahul sir. Hello, am I audible, Rahul sir?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'm listening.
So you have explained various aspects of the drama and theater. So I have a question that how semiotics plays a vital role in order to understand the theater and drama between the line and beyond the text.
Can you come again?
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yeah, but one or two words I could not listen. You meant
semiotics. I'll repeat my question, sir. You have explained various aspects of the drama and theater. So my question is that how semiotics plays a vital role in order to understand the theater and drama between the line and beyond the text.
Yeah. See, when we say semiotics, we talk about the sign system.
Yes.
Just imagine, reimagine whether the text or the performance in terms of the sign system. And then you will start getting a different kind of a meaning. It is just translating from the text to the signs. Performance also gets a sign text then. And then it is interplay between the signs. It's a very, very but an important thing is that when you start looking from the alternative ways of looking, let's say we talk about the pedagogy, let's say semiotics used in terms of pedagogy tool here, and talking about performance, and now you're saying, okay, let us use semiotics there. So I would say, okay, let me use it. What semiotics or any other pedagogic tool will do is that it will add or complement to what I am looking at. And what is found out is something silent in the performance. Let's say if I'm concentrating on performance, and something that is not visible in performance will be found out through semiotics. If you start looking through the text in between and lines and all, you also start talking about, as I said, in early part, is about the silences. Language is not a comprehensive means to express everything. Language is very partial, right? So you have to read in between lines. Now, performance actually creates or recreates those silences in front of you visibly. Semiotics also does that in a different way. Now, you can use any number of pedagogic tools. Let's say I teach a course on comics studies. There, I have the comic panels and all. Now, what I do is I see that from the visual comic panels put side by side, and the closure, the gap between the two panels, make me read in between the two incidents or the two time zones. There I do the activity of closure. It is about finding the silent.
So can we apply
pedagogic tools?
In addition to that, can we apply this tool very effectively to understand the absurd theater?
Yeah, why not? For example, if you read absurd theater, and especially the Waiting for Godot.
Yeah, exactly. You have mentioned it.
Yeah, he specifically mentions that language is inadequate. Language falls flat. That's why there is a repetitive nature of language. Says nothing can be done. Nothing can be done. And language is actually an obstacle, because the Western discourse about language is that everything is reduced through or in language. That's why he reduces language to the prelingual stage where there is only blabbering. So language doesn't communicate to you any meaning. So language, you can't rely on language. I mean, generally, we do that in drama. We read the text, we get the story. In Waiting for Godot, you read the story 100 times, you won't get the story because there is no story in the dialogue. And that's what the point is. Language is completely inadequate. Language is basically the distraction. Then you have to start another semiotic tool here. Like that, any other thing. How bodies relate to each other. So the basic fundamental ways in which human bodies communicated before the civilization started, through signs and symbols.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kindness. And it was an excellent presentation. Thank you, sir.
Okay, coming to the
Thank you.
Yes, concluding part of this session. I'm very much thankful to Dr. Rahul Kamble sir for his scholarly speech on Indian women's theatre. I'm also thankful to all the participants, and particularly who have also raised questions and made this session very fruitful. Lastly, I thank all of you and declare that this session is over. Now I hand over mic to Dr. Ravandi sir.
Thank you very much, Rapsi sir. And once again, thanks a lot, Dr. Rahul Kamble sir, for your presence, the way you delivered your lecture on the topic. And we are very happy, very glad. So, without wasting our time, we are going to start valedictory session.